Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs War Room Update. We are on day number 318 of the war with Gaza. That means 318 days where there have been over 100 hostages being held by the genocidal terrorists. The war there continues on with full force, with Israeli forces operating all through the Gaza Strip in the northern areas, dealing with the ramifications of the attack on 2 days ago, where 2 soldiers were killed in the Netzarim corridor, dealing with the south, with the Rafiah corridor, that Philadelphia corridor that we've so often spoken about, that's now in discussions with Hamas as part of this deal to possibly bring about the freeing of the hostages. And Hamas is demanding that Israeli forces retreat entirely from the Philadelphia corridor. This is the area adjacent to the border with Egypt. This is the area under which Israeli forces reportedly over the last month and a half, have destroyed 184 tunnels in that area. Some of them, many of them, in fact, crossing over into Egypt. This was the lifeline, the oxygen pipe for Hamas to receive goods, money, weaponry through Egypt with the consent of Egypt, with the turning a blind eye of Egypt, everyone with their own approach to that subject. In the south, obviously, we're continuing on with the aggression of the Houthis, another Iranian proxy, still interfering with the freedom of navigation in the Gulf of Aden, still trying to attack ships coming up into the Red Sea, and still really causing a massive disturbance to the entire area. The coalition forces there, led by the US forces, having to shoot down almost on a daily basis either missiles or UAVs that have been shot by the Houthis directed towards Israel. Just a few days ago, also having to destroy attack boats, Houthi attack boats that were sailing in the Gulf of Aden and really looking for civilian prey. In Judea and Samaria, we've seen really what seems to be a tremendous upspike in the terrorism. We've seen a number of deadly attacks just in the last few days in the Jordan Valley. Jonathan Deutsch just a few days ago, and then yesterday another attack being carried out by a worker of an Israeli, and he was murdered by that worker, someone who ostensibly had a security clearance from the Shabak from the Israeli security forces to get into Israel and to work in the settlements, but nonetheless carrying out a terror attack and murdering an Israeli. Last night we saw in Tel Aviv what appeared to be another suspicious event. We're not sure exactly the nature of the event until now, but a man with a bag full of explosives, what appeared to be a suicide belt, exploded in the heart of Tel Aviv. Luckily, he was the only one killed, but this is something that we haven't seen for a very long time in Tel Aviv, a suicide attack. The last time that we saw that type of attack was in 2006 in a shawarma store. And so that would have been one of those things that both Hezbollah and Iran are looking to really create this impression, and Hamas also really to create this impression of disaster and destruction on the streets of Israel as a response to everything that's going on. And as I said, luckily we were able to avoid that attack and or avoid any really tremendous damage from that attack, and only the terrorist himself being killed. What we're seeing at the same time, although, is this push within Judea and Samaria to carry out more and more terror attacks against Israelis, against Israeli targets, something that is all connected in and intertwined between the different factors, between the different Iranian proxies. They're all looking for the response to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, allegedly, but not officially confirmed by Israel, carried out by Israel about 2.5 weeks ago. And what we're going to discuss today really a little bit more in depth is the Hezbollah's response to the assassination of Fuad Shukar. Fuad Shukar was really the chief of staff of Hezbollah, assassinated on the same day as Ismail Haniyeh, and Hezbollah really promising a massive response, some of which we've already seen, some of which we've less seen, and we're just expecting. And Hezbollah really trying to play into that entire psychological warfare by just this weekend releasing new videos of its extensive tunnel system, allegedly in southern Lebanon. And all of these things we're going to try and unwrap today with my guest, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve, Sarit Zehavi, a former IDF intelligence officer and the founder and director of the Alma Center in Israel's north. Sarit, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sarit, give us just an overview, just an introduction for our audience of what's been going on with Hezbollah in the last few weeks. We've seen a number of different developments, but really, I follow your. For anyone who doesn't yet follow them, Sarit and the Alma Center puts out a daily and a weekly update, a fascinating insight into everything that's going on in the north. But so for those that don't follow you as closely as I do, Sarit, please give us an overview of what's going on just in the last few weeks. Fuad Shukar is assassinated. What then starts?
I think maybe before the last few weeks, I can start with the last 24 hours because this morning I woke up from the sounds of war. We had alerts in Nahariya, which is 15 minutes from home. There were a barrage of drones that penetrated to Israel. Sounds they were intercepted. And then there was a barrage of rockets to areas in evacuated communities next to the border. And then there was, we had some more artillery, which we don't know exactly whether it was the interceptors or something else. Bottom line, it lasted about an hour of kind of a war in the sky. And this is how I woke up today at 6:40. This is daily reality over here in the north in the past 10 months. To tell you the truth, Maurice, nothing changed. Nothing changed in the past few weeks, except for the fact that in the past 2 months, we see Hezbollah launching much more attacks to areas that are not evacuated. But we are living in war in the north of Israel since October 8th, and there are daily attacks by Hezbollah, whether it's UAVs or rockets or anti-tank missiles, and the numbers of the type of munition is changing. Randomly, sometimes it's more anti-tanks and sometimes it's more UAVs. But in general, it's a pretty stable war of attrition, while we have 43 communities that are evacuated. The only thing that is changing is that we see more shooting to areas that are not evacuated. About 20% of the attacks in July were to areas that are not evacuated, in a distance of about 10 kilometers from the border. Areas that are evacuated are up to 5 kilometers from the border. Yesterday, I visited Kiryat Shmona and Metula. I was there while there were attacks of Hezbollah in those areas. These areas are empty for civilians. Metula, which was a beautiful town that was founded in the end of the 19th century, is today, it looks like a military base. I felt very safe inside because I was inside an area which was considered a safe area, but it's not safe for civilians. We cannot have civilian lives in those areas anymore. There is no civilian life. I saw a house that was hit directly by a rocket, and the person who was there was his life was rescued because he hid inside a house in an internal room, but the whole backyard was completely ruined. These are sites that continue every day. Every day we have new. Kiryat Shmona, there are around 1,200 requests for compensation for damages of homes, cars, and others. They had more than 10 public buildings that were directly hit. Kindergarten, schools. I saw a hit in a kindergarten. All of that without talking one word about retaliation to Fuad Shukar assassination in Beirut. Hezbollah didn't retaliate yet. Everything that we see now is in the field of what we call soft power, meaning psychological warfare. And the hard power, which I just described, has nothing to do with Fuad Shukr. This is daily warfare between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel is also attacking Hezbollah military operatives in Lebanon. More than 400 of them were killed. More than 40 of them were commanders, field commanders. But it doesn't stop the fire. All of that doesn't stop the fire. And 60% of those who were killed by the IDF, of those military operatives of Hezbollah, live in South Lebanon. So all these talkings about withdrawal are actually irrelevant to the situation we are dealing with.
It's amazing to hear the description from people actually living it every single day. Maybe amazing is the wrong word. It's harrowing, really. But it's living in that reality, as I understand it, or at least from reports that I've seen, that there seems to be a reduction in the firing of anti-tank missiles that really on that close area of the border, and it seems from the reports, Sarit, that there's much more use, as you described, of the longer range missiles, of the Grad missiles. Is that something that you've identified in recently, or is that something that I've missed all the way through? That use really of much heavier artillery as well.
We are trying to look monthly, so we are pretty much in the middle of August. So for now, we do see a decline during August in anti-tank missiles, but I think this is, hand in hand with the smuggling routes and the shipment and the supply of these missiles to Hezbollah. We saw ups and downs with the launching of anti-tank missiles during the war. Just to all of our audience, anti-tank missiles have nothing to do with tanks. They are being launched against homes, people, workers, soldiers, everything that can actually hit. Sometimes it tanks, in most cases it's not. And we don't have a defensive answer against them because they cannot be intercepted by Iron Dome. We cannot define Grad missiles as long range. These are just simple rockets, and the amount of attacks is pretty stable since, I can say, since January or December. Very little fluctuations in the amount of rocket attacks. Important to bear in mind that when we have rockets attacks, it means that a few tens of them are being launched at the same time. It's not 1 or 2 or 4. It's 40 or 30, and this is heard very well from where I live. And it sends many people to shelters because they are inaccurate in opposed to the anti-tank missiles. So it's like spread all over the place. They can target one area, and with a few kilometers with all the area, people will go to shelters. And it's a huge disturbance to the daily life. Again, just this morning, there was a discussion with the parents where I live. How are we going to send the kids to school, back to school in September 1st? Under this kind of situation that, yes, we see more launching of these Grads, as I've said, to areas that are not evacuated. It's not long range, it's to 10 kilometers, but it's areas that are not evacuated, and that's why more people are having to run for shelter every day.
It seems on that level that really the international community is very, very quiet about the effects of this war on Israel's civilian population, as opposed to the tremendous focus that there is on the suffering of the Gazans. But if I remember rightly from your last report, sorry, and you said it clearly, and it must be understood. I think I read that since the war started, since the 8th of October, there have been 2,687, not including this morning, obviously, or even last night, 2,687 attacks from the north, each one with 4, 5, 50 rockets. We're talking about somewhere in the region of 10 to 15,000 rockets that have been fired by Hezbollah at Israel's north. I don't think that people really even understand really the size of that, the immensity of that attack. The idea of
about 1,000 drones, 1,000 drones. These are I agree. These are the numbers. About 2,700 attacks since the war started. We didn't start this war. Hezbollah started this war. Hezbollah was preparing for war against Israel, at least in the past 18 years since the previous war, actually. It never stopped. It was fully prepared to launch a campaign just like Hamas in October 6th, like in October 7th. Luckily, it didn't. Today, probably its interest is more to recover before launching a similar attack after all the damages that were caused by Israel. But I want to say something, since you mentioned Gaza, I want to say something that I'm not sure that people outside of this region understand. I totally understand the worry for what we call civilians or not involved in conflicts. But at the same time, we must understand what are we facing. And we are facing society of resistance. This is right in Gaza, and it is correct also in Lebanon. Society of resistance means that the mother who is being interviewed while the town around her is ruined, she's apologizing that her children didn't become martyrs. That's a society of resistance. It means that in every third home in South Lebanon, there is a military use of Hezbollah, whether these are missiles or mines or intelligence posts or, I don't know, drones or whatever. This is what this means. It means that all civilian infrastructures are mobilized for the cause, which is the military infrastructure, which is the terrorist infrastructure. That's the reality in Lebanon. This was the reality in Gaza. And I don't think that to compare, it's a problem, because here I was trying to educate my kids to live normal life. Okay, we don't hide rockets beneath. I don't hide rockets beneath my son's bed. I wouldn't do that.
Or in his kindergarten, or in his school, or in the synagogue.
Not launching rockets from within communities that are populated. Okay, within neighborhoods where people live. This is not happening. So if you want to create symmetry, we should drill down to the details. That's very important, to understand the small details of this conflict and what's going on and what exactly we are facing. And we are facing an enemy that deliberately puts his own people at risk, because that's the ethos. That's how they are being mobilized. That's what they believe in. The same way we believe in democracy, this mother believes that her children should be martyrs.
And that the people are expendable, and their lives are expendable. And the more people that die, specifically civilians, the better it is. I actually saw a report that yesterday evening, Israeli forces attacked an arms storage area of Hezbollah, and allegedly a number of Syrian refugees were killed there. And the hypothesis was that Hezbollah is specifically using the civilians to really act as human shields around their military sites, so that when they are attacked and the civilians are killed, they can then say, look, Israel is attacking innocent civilians. And that, as you say, is a complete a part of their ideology, to use and abuse civilians. They are, as Dr. Howard Rode said a few days ago, that the terrorist organizations treat the civilians as paper towels, use, abuse, and throw away. And that's
organization is entrenched in the civilian society. Is part of it. Hezbollah has civilian branch of education, medical services. They distribute food. They mobilize the children from day one to become Hezbollah terrorists. It is part of the society. It's not a foreign militia that took over the society and it's oppressing it. It is part of it. And this is something that is really, really difficult to understand. And we examine that daily, following the public opinion in Lebanon and how people think in Lebanon. And unfortunately, with all what we see in Lebanon and happen in Lebanon, we don't see a change in the base, in the hardcore base of Hezbollah that's still loyal to Hezbollah.
So I want to link.
Educated to believe in these values from day one.
So that brings me exactly to a point that I want to bring in from a few different things. 2 days ago, a report that Lebanon basically is now without electricity. Their last power plant running out of fuel, running out of the ability to even produce that last 3-4 hours of electricity that Lebanon has had for the last few months. It's nothing to do with Israel. It's nothing to do with Israel's responses to the attacks from Lebanon. It's the failed country being run by a terrorist organization that is really has a stranglehold, hasn't allowed Lebanon to move on, hasn't allowed Lebanon to appoint a president for the last almost 3 years, hasn't allowed Lebanon to elect a government with a caretaker prime minister sitting in, hasn't allowed the country to move on the one hand, a country that is entirely failed financially and socially on the one hand. And then on the other hand, what we saw, as I said in the introduction, is new promotional videos being put out by Hezbollah showing this massive tunnel network that they've been, as you said, digging for the last 18 years in southern Lebanon, around Lebanon, at the expense of already billions and billions of dollars. We're seeing the same thing, Hamas, Hezbollah, the same thing. They take all of the resources that they have, they use them and pour them into attack and assault weapons to destroy Israel, while at the same time completely neglecting, using and abusing the civilian population. Does that not even affect, you said that it hasn't changed the public opinion in Lebanon. Do the Lebanese people not see that Hezbollah is the source of their problem and not Israel?
Who is the Lebanese people? Lebanese people is it's a very diverse society that is composed of different religious sects, different loyalties and different interests. And to create a joint interest among Lebanese, it is between impossible to very hard. I don't know, we didn't succeed until today. And they didn't succeed until today. And what you actually see is you see that there is a traditional opposition to Hezbollah in Lebanon, among the Druze, among the Sunnis, among the Christians of Lebanon. And they are the ones who are posting the criticism that you see against Hezbollah. And at the same time, most of the Shiites, not all of them, but most of the Shiites in Lebanon remain loyal to Hezbollah. And the reason they remain loyal to Hezbollah is because Hezbollah invested for decades, not 10 years, for decades, in creating dependency. As you said, it's a failed state, but you don't hear that babies are dying because there is no electricity in the past 24 hours, right? How come? Because there are solaric panels and there are generators, and Hezbollah is providing these, the solaric panels and the generators and the fuel for the generators. It is providing this. So you don't have an infrastructure of the state, but you do have private infrastructures of the different sects. And Hezbollah is the strongest one that has a civilian infrastructure and a military infrastructure at the same time. And that's why, since these people are on the one hand dependent completely for every service that you can imagine, for your children, for the children in Hezbollah, and at the same time Hezbollah is educating these children, they still loyal to Hezbollah. That's how this is how this mechanism work of what we call the human shield tactic.
And that's incredible to think that the ideology of these people is so embedded in them, the hatred of Israel is so deep set that they're willing to suffer all of the ramifications of living without electricity, no hospitals, no services, anything going on apart from really a minimal basis that Hezbollah can support, and yet they still carry on with their support.
The definition should not be Israel. They don't say the word Israel. It's about religion. They are saying very clearly that their mission, Hezbollah's mission, is to make Lebanon an Islamic state. And Jerusalem is a very good mobilizer. So all these military operatives that I've mentioned that were killed by the IDF since this war started, each of them gets a nice poster with this picture. And on top of the poster, it is written, "Martyr on the road to Jerusalem."
Unbelievable.
This is what it's all about. It's not about Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not about a land dispute or a maritime dispute. It's not about oil or energy. It's not about money or resources. It's about a radical ideology that Hezbollah adopted from Iran. And this has been going on in the past 40 years.
So what you're saying is I think very, very clear on the one hand, but really poses a great difficulty on the other. I'll explain. For the last 20 years, the US administrations, all of them, without exception, have been funding the Lebanese army, have been pouring in really tens of billions of, or if not hundreds of millions of dollars into the Lebanese army that was meant to be implementing Resolution 1701, that was meant to be combating Hezbollah. And what you're describing to me now is really a complete disconnect, that it's as if the US administrations haven't been able to really see the elephant in the room. Hezbollah is controlling Lebanon, and whilst you are pouring more and more money in, you're not fighting extremist the Iranian proxy, but you're really pouring money into that whole system of that's maintaining the ecosystem of Hezbollah. How is it that your very, very clear understanding of what's going on in Lebanon has really passed entirely over the heads of the US administrations? You see Amos Hochstein coming here every few weeks to try and negotiate the new deal with these genocidal terrorists. What are they missing? What don't they understand?
I must tell you something about Lebanese army. Lebanese army, it's half of the combat soldiers in the Lebanese army are Muslim Shiites. This means that you can have a family that one brother will be from the Lebanese army and the other one will be in Hezbollah. So Lebanon basically is, as you said, a failed state, no government, no president, but also it has two armies, the Hezbollah and Lebanese army. While Hezbollah is getting its orders not from any Lebanese government, but from Iran. Okay, kind of a relationship, on almost a partnership between the leader of Hezbollah and the Iranians. He's the most, I always say that Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, is the most senior CEO of this IRGC project in the Middle East. I think that I'm not completely against giving assistance to the Lebanese army, because I think this could be a very important way to preserve some kind of American influence in Lebanon. And moreover, there is never a vacuum. If United States will not assist the Lebanese army, somebody else who is already waiting behind the corner will be there, whether it's Russia, Iran, or China. So I understand the need to give assistance to the Lebanese army, but we should not have any illusions. If there will be a full-scale war, these bullets that were provided to the Lebanese army will be shot against IDF soldiers.
I just have to question that for a second, Sarit. Do you believe that there would be a situation in which the Lebanese army would fight Hezbollah in order to defend Israel?
The Lebanese army will fight Israel in order to defend Lebanon.
So that's the understanding that.
And I'm saying, moreover, I'm saying that today and before this war, Hezbollah is using the infrastructures of the Lebanese army in South Lebanon for its own terrorist purposes. Okay, I've seen this with my own eyes. I saw Lebanese army accompany Hezbollah gathering intelligence after me and after IDF forces on the border before the war. So there is collaboration between Lebanese army and Hezbollah. Lebanese army assisted Hezbollah to hide its military presence from UNIFIL. We've seen this, IDF published it many years ago. It's not, what I'm saying is not intelligence. This is things that were published in the past. I don't know what the United States is missing. I'm not an expert to the West, Western policies. But I think that if we truly want to deal with the problem, we first need to understand the problem and then think of solutions. I think that what we're doing now is to try to impose solutions that has nothing to do with the problem.
So you mentioned UNIFIL. Give us a little bit of an insight into what UNIFIL has done. Are they an effective force? Are they a relevant force? Are they the fig leaf for Hezbollah? What are they doing there in Lebanon?
They are risking their lives for nothing. This is what UNIFIL is today. Yesterday there was on the news that 3 UNIFIL soldiers were wounded by a blast next to their vehicle. I don't know exactly what happened, but there are 10,000 soldiers, including European soldiers, Spanish, French, Italian, Irish, Finnish, that are, and Indians and more, that are now for the past 10 months, they are in a war zone. Hezbollah is using them as human shields as well, meaning that Hezbollah is launching its munitions sometimes from next to the UNIFIL positions. And they were ineffective with regard to the idea that actually brought them there. And the idea was to create an area which is free of any illegitimate weapon, south to the Litani River, to the border with Israel. That's about 25 kilometers in most cases. UNIFIL was deployed since 2006 with 10,000 soldiers in this area. It was a little bit more, a little bit less, but that's the general number. And it was ineffective in preventing Hezbollah from military deploying in this area. It is not entering, at the beginning they said that they are not entering to private territories because it's not within their mandate. Then they said that they only came to assist the Lebanese army. And eventually they ended up with not getting to any area which is problematic, meaning where Hezbollah is intimidating them, where Hezbollah is blocking their way, where Hezbollah is threatening their vehicles and their soldiers, taking their cameras, stoning the vehicles, beating the soldiers, burning the vehicles sometimes. Every like tens of incidents a year, clashes between Hezbollah and UNIFIL, and eventually UNIFIL became that afraid that even to go to open areas that like shooting ranges that they saw from the helicopter patrol to go and check the area, they were waiting for an approval from the Lebanese armed forces, which never came, even though they didn't need any approval by their mandate. So this is just a very small example. There are many, many more. I think that UNIFIL should be minimized. It's a waste of money and a waste of life. To a very small force, because it's good to have some kind of international mechanism that can mediate tactical issues on the border, but I'm not sure that this is solving the major problem we just discussed.
I mean, that's just one of those things that I gave a lecture for the JCPA just about a week and a half ago, talking about the UN and its entire anti-Israel bias, and really talking about these organizations, these UN organizations that have a specific anti-Israel bias. UNIFIL, I don't think is one of them.
I must tell you, I must stop here because I don't think that UNIFIL is any anti-Israeli bias.
That's what I just said. I don't think that UNIFIL is one of those organizations that has an anti-Israel bias. I just think that they're just a useless organization, and that really has been abused by Hezbollah, and really it's giving that pretense of having some type of international mechanism. UNIFIL has been around since 1978. It was set up by the Security Council, and really since then there's been war after war after war after war. UNIFIL, I think, has entirely failed, not for its own reasons, in its mandate, and it's one of those organizations that it seems nice to have. What did UNIFIL, for example, do and report about this massive? And we saw it over the weekend, Sarit, and you've reported on it before, the massive tunnel infrastructure that Hezbollah has built. We saw really tunnels big enough to hold huge semi-trailers, and really massive storage of weapons.
I don't know whether these tunnels that you saw are in South Lebanon in the UNIFIL area of operation. What I can say is that IDF found a few years ago border crossing tunnels into Israel and transferred all the information to UNIFIL. And basically, UNIFIL didn't go to the openings of these tunnels in Lebanon because these openings were in private territories. And as I've said, UNIFIL is not entering private territories. They were launching of rockets from what they say, Olive Orchard, so it's a private territory. They say that they cannot investigate the killing of the 12 Druze children in Israel because it's not in Lebanon, but they were attacked from Lebanon. So how come there is no investigation? And eventually we end up again and again and again with the UNIFIL statement that they call all sides to be calm and relaxed, which, as you can understand after this morning, I'm not calm and I'm not relaxed. And I think that, as I've said, UNIFIL is not fulfilling its mission or the idea of its mission, and it should be minimized. But you mentioned the tunnels, and I want to say something around it. Everything that you saw in Gaza about the infrastructures of tunnels and underground warfare exists in Lebanon. In Gaza, they had like 10 years to do that, and in Lebanon, they had 40. They've been working on that since the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s. We published a report about the strategic tunnels of Hezbollah. These are the tunnels that you saw in the video that was published last week. These are tunnels that are meant to enable Hezbollah to transfer launchers and missiles and military operatives from one area to another. The video was meant as part of the psychological warfare, and we should not be intimidated specifically by the video, okay? Because we know the capabilities of Hezbollah. But we believe that this is true. This is the infrastructure of Hezbollah beneath the homes of the Lebanese, whether it's in Beirut or in the Bekaa Valley or in South Lebanon or in between, connecting these areas. As I've said, not necessarily in the UNIFIL area of operation. When we published the report, we showed that there is an involvement of North Korea and Iran in excavating these tunnels. Hezbollah military operatives in the 90s went to North Korea to learn underground warfare, and the tunnels that you saw in the video looks very similar to tunnels that were found in the Korean border. It is much more challenging to excavate in Lebanon than in Gaza because it's a rocky area. It takes much more time. That's why it was difficult for Israelis to believe that this is what is actually happening. But as I've said, when you have 40 years, we discovered that it's possible, and our enemies are working underground massively, okay? This is something we fail to understand. The underground warfare, it's part of their strategy, their tactic, their daily military life. And this is not only true in Lebanon, this is true also in Iran. We published about 20 videos of missile sites in Iran, and they are all underground in the mountains, dug in the mountains.
It seems to be a further development of what we saw, and also has been again reported on recently, that whole idea that we saw the new discovery of the Second Lebanon War in 2006 was what the IDF referred to as the Shmuot Teva, the nature reserves, where suddenly we discovered that Hezbollah had dug into really into forests and into all types of really covered areas, massive areas in which massive facilities for shooting missiles and for shooting rockets. And it's something that we seem to have missed along the way, and we had great difficulty then dealing with. And that seems to have just been developed more and more, going underground, using the rocky terrain as their bomb shelters and as a cover for all of their activities.
That's right. And not only under the forests, but also under the homes and under the schools and under the towns. Everything is underground.
Sarit, what do you see as the near future for Israel and Lebanon? Where are we going? Can we continue on with this ever escalating war of attrition, or is there going to be a breaking?
No, there is no option that Israel will continue this war of attrition. It has been going on for too long. Imagine that in the United States, Houston will be evacuated because of terrorist attacks for 10 months. This is unheard of. This is not something that is acceptable, and it shouldn't be acceptable when we speak about the state of Israel. Because as you can see, once we evacuated 0 to 5 kilometers from the border, Hezbollah is now launching to 10 kilometers from the border. So we cannot afford losing more areas. Israelis should be able to live anywhere there is the state of Israel. Actually, anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter, like any other person in the world. But there is no reason why we cannot live in legitimate borders of the state of Israel. The borders today between Lebanon and Israel, except for very, very few areas of dispute, which are areas of few meters, and I'm not going to get to all the details here because it's a long story. But in general, the areas where Israelis are living and were evacuated are areas where there is no dispute. So there is no reason why we can't live there and why we have to see the beautiful Galilee going on fire every day. I saw the burned forests yesterday. It was really, really sad. We had like 150 dunams. I don't know how much is this in acres that were burned since this war started. 150,000 dunams. This is unheard of numbers. I don't know how much is it, like 70, 80,000 acres?
I think so.
In Israeli terms, these are unheard of numbers, and this is a reality that we cannot accept and we should not accept, and a solution must be found. And now, since you mentioned Ochstein, I'm not against the diplomatic arrangement, but it cannot be a fiction like what happened in 2006. It cannot be a fiction. We cannot have another diplomatic arrangement that will enable Hezbollah to be capable of invading to these communities and massacre us just like Hamas had done.
And that's really what 1701 did. It created a fiction as if Hezbollah would be disarmed, as if Hezbollah would be forced to move north of the Litani, as if the Lebanese army would move into the south and control the south. But in reality, the opposite was true. Hezbollah went from strength to strength, took over the entire southern Lebanon area and pushed the Lebanese army out. So that type of a solution would again just really be putting off another inevitable conflict. And I think what you said before needs to be stressed over and over and over again. These are not the settlements, as they're called. These are Israeli towns and cities in areas of Israel that are undisputed, and yet they're still under attack from the genocidal terrorists.
Many of them were founded before the State of Israel, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of these areas have been around for almost 100 years, some of them a little bit more. And we're talking about really the mainstead of Jewish settlement in Israel, again, even pre-state, before the turn of the century. Now, Sarit, as we come to the end of the program, I like to end with a positive note. There must be something that you can see positive within this framework of the continuing war of attrition. What do you think that light at the end of the tunnel?
The only thing that is positive here is that this war exposed or revealed who are the Israelis. We are completely mobilized to the cause. And the cause is to bring prosperity and peace to the state of Israel. And all of us, since October 7th, are part of this effort to defend ourselves and our children, and to make sure that this country will succeed and continue. Because this is the insurance company of all of the Jewish people. We truly believe in this.
So I believe that what you said now was really one of the mistakes of our enemies. They understood the not dissent, the disagreements, even the vocal and very loud demonstrations that the country had experienced for a long time. They misunderstood that as something which was undermining Israeli society, when really it was just a show of a very, very healthy, albeit a little bit crazy democracy. But that was what they misunderstood. They thought Israel is destroyed from within, and therefore now is the time to attack. And I think what their attack has shown is that Israel is, I think, more together today than it ever has been, and that started immediately on the 7th of October, when everybody put aside their political differences, their disagreements on judicial reform, no judicial reform. Everyone turned up to defend the country and to fight against its enemies. And for that, really is one of their bigger mistakes, but really a sign of Israel's, I think, tremendous society that has been both fighting outwardly and supporting inwardly tens of thousands of refugees within our own country who suddenly find themselves without homes, running around from hotel to hotel in makeshift schools. Not everyone, I think, appreciates what is necessarily going on in Israel as a result of both the war in the south and the war in the north.
We found that the young generation, and I'm looking at my children as well, we find out that they, we thought they are the Generation Z in the United States. They call them, here they are called the TikTok generation, but eventually they volunteer, and not only to the army, they have very high awareness of society involvement and social involvement, and they want to help. I can tell you, my son is starting this week a year of service. Like he's going to a year of service, and then he will go to the army for 3 years. So he's going for a year of service, and he's going to the Negev to assist in building the communities in the Negev that are coming back home now. Amazing, and all of them want to be part of the doing rather than talking. And I think we as parents, we actually are learning from them how to be in the doing.
Our youth have been outstanding. As some of our audience knows, I've discussed it before. My son is a combat officer up in the north, and he talks about the soldiers coming in and seeing the motivation and seeing really their dedication to the security of the state of Israel. It really is a generation of lions, and not just TikTok. And for that, we are very grateful. But for now, unfortunately, we've come to the end. Sarit, thank you for joining us. And please do keep safe up there in the north. We, for our audience, will be back with you again on Wednesday. Until then, everybody around, really wherever you're joining us from, do please keep safe, and we will see you again. For now, goodbye. Goodbye, sir.